That's not a normal engine.
No, Tommy, that is the Turbine car.
This is the 1963 Chrysler Turbine car, one of the most legendary American cars of all time. And in this video, we're going for a ride in the Turbine car, one of just 9 remaining. And we're going to bust some myths and find out why this car never made it into production.
Tommy, the transmission tunnel on this car is so cool.
That is truly one of the most over-designed and yet unbelievably functional set of controls. Look at that. Is that the shifter?
Park is down, neutral, and you'll see it here. I'll go into drive.
Wow.
That is very cool. Yeah, everything about the design on this car was so forward-looking. I absolutely love that bit of design at the front of the tunnel. And the gauges are also really cool. So you've got speed tachometer and then a pyrometer, right?
Yes.
And I guess the pyrometer is for the inlet.
It is. Right now we're at 13,000. I'm sorry, 1,300.
Nice. And then what would be a regular operating range temperature for this car that you'd like to see?
We like to keep it around 13. As I accelerate, I'll see it go up to 15, but it comes right back.
The other interesting thing about this car is right around 130 horsepower, but over 400 pound-feet of torque, right?
Yes. So it's equivalent to like a small diesel.
Wow.
The feel of it, you know.
Right. Yeah, and a little bit of lag in the acceleration when you press the pedal?
No, not really. Just
Not too much.
Oh my gosh.
That's already second gear.
Case, this is truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Now, the experience I would equate this most to that people might understand is like an EV, right?
Yeah.
So you do get the sensation of shifting because it does have a more conventional automatic transmission, but as you kind of glide down the road, there is almost no feedback from under the hood that anything is happening that shouldn't be happening, right?
And it's so interesting that people talked about this car being very loud because it makes a bit of noise if you're standing right at the front end, but especially from sitting inside the car, it's really not particularly loud at all.
100%. Yeah, I mean, you can barely hear this little whir of that turbine spinning away at tens of thousands of RPM.
Yeah, I think the peak is something like 60,000 RPM.
Yep. Right now we're about 25 as I accelerate a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll let back off and it'll go to 22.
It is so cool. The gauge layout is very cool. Tell me, these 3 dials right here on the tunnel next to the parking brake, what are those guys?
We have lower rear defrost and interior lights.
Okay, so just some basic controls for some of the interior functions of the car.
From a ride quality standpoint, it rides like a 1960s boat, right? So it kind of looks small and compact on the outside, which I think it largely is, but it definitely has that classic mid-60s American float to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely, it doesn't feel like it's set up to be a sports car, which makes sense with 130 horsepower. I don't think that was the intention for it. Now, one question I do have, as far as fuel, when you guys are running it for a demonstration like this, what do you usually put in it?
We're running it on kerosene.
Kerosene, okay.
Kerosene.
Which, kerosene is essentially a jet fuel, right?
Yes.
It would be basically the same thing. And do you feel like it runs best on kerosene, or does it run pretty similar on other fuels?
Since I've been here for 20 years, we've never ran on anything but kerosene.
Todd, have you several times gotten to drive the Turbine car, or is this the first time you're getting to operate it?
No, we have to load it on and off a truck all the time, of course. Semis, but we've had to do a little events like this.
Okay.
So,
and where does this one typically live?
This one lives right here in Detroit at one of our facilities.
Okay. This is very cool. And there's only 9 of them still around, right?
Yes.
So what is your impression of driving it? How do you feel about this car?
Power-wise, you mentioned the torque and horsepower. It's about like a 318 is how it feels.
Yeah.
But of course the jet sound, I mean, it's incredible.
And is it a 3-speed transmission?
It's a 3-speed torque flight trans that's been modified. It doesn't have a torque converter. it has a gear reduction system that's 10 to 1
And I know
because of the RPM.
one of the proposed advantages of the turbine engine was a relatively easy maintenance interval and life. So for you guys keeping this car running, is it relatively simple?
Yes, it is. We have to be cautious with the few hoses that it has. And I say that because it doesn't have antifreeze.
Yeah.
It has transmission fluid, which runs through the engine and the power steering system. Other than that, it has brake fluid. That's it.
So compared to some of the other cars in the collection, this is maybe on the easier side to keep running.
Yes, that part of it. There's no tune-up. We're not changing plugs or wires.
Yeah.
It just runs.
That's very cool. And have you all measured, because I know it's a lot of people's question, the temperature of the exhaust at the back of the car. Have you guys measured usually what the temperature is from the gas there?
No, we never have. Unlike the old superstitions where you're going to burn the pavement or start grass on fire, you can put your hand all the way up to the exhaust.
Okay.
It's hot, but you're not going to get burnt.
Yeah, so it's hot like any normal combustion engine exhaust would be.
Yes.
And it seems like there's a lot of misconceptions about this car because people talk about them being very loud. People talk about how hot the exhaust was. But it seems like many of those things are now being up close to the car, riding in it and experiencing it, not necessarily true.
Right.
What would you say is the biggest misconception about this vehicle?
Probably just what you touched on, the flames out the back and burning stuff. And,
yeah.
And the best part is if you look at the back, your taillights are shaped like cones, like they would be thrust coming out of it.
Yeah.
People walk behind it and put their hands up to it.
They're worried.
Like they're going to get burnt. But they don't.
And it's cool looking underneath the car because it's an absolutely massive outlet, or the two outlets in the rear.
Yes.
They're pretty huge.
Yeah, way down bottom, they're big aluminum baffles.
And it is amazing because we're driving over some undulations in the road and the car is exceptionally smooth. Like we said, not only in the powertrain, but the suspension is very, very smooth. And it is, I saw leaf springs in the rear. I'm thinking leafs in the front as well.
It's coil in front.
Coil in the front, okay.
It's torsion bar, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So it's production B-body.
Yeah.
And brakes are the same. So I could actually order a 63 Belvedere set of brake shoes.
Really?
And it'd be the same. Yeah.
Very cool. So this is just about probably the coolest B-body that exists.
It's sure fun to drive.
Yeah. Is the steering pretty light?
Yeah, it's got that normal Chrysler 60 and 70s.
Yeah, kind of like two fingers.
Little floaty feeling.
So
almost an overpowered power steering.
Overall drives a lot like a luxury car.
Yes.
Are the brakes pretty light as well?
Yeah, it does have power brakes. So the brakes are like production B-body really. So it stops nice. There's no pull.
Yeah.
So it's
And do you know how many miles are on this particular car?
This one here is showing 29,314.
Interesting. So do you know, was this one of the 5 prototypes for Chrysler, or was this one of the 50 cars that were sent out to people to test?
I don't know that. I don't know if there's any documentation of which ones are which.
The history of this in particular?
Brent would be a good one to check on that.
Yeah, and we'll definitely interview him, talk to him, but this is just such a special experience. We get to do a lot of cool things at this job, and riding in this vehicle is right up there at the top. I've got to imagine that this is not a bad day of work for you either.
It's not too bad.
Any anxiety around driving it since it is such a piece of history? And
yeah, there's always that.
Yeah.
I'm watching out for bicycles and stuff like that.
Yeah, watching the temperatures, making sure that everything is where it should be. But I'm amazed just how well behaved this car is. What do you think, Tommy? Any other points or questions?
Well, I think the weird thing about it is it shifts, so you can actually feel it shift as you drive along, but you don't actually hear an RPM change.
Yeah.
So the engine maintains a constant 30,000 RPM, for example, under acceleration, and you can feel the trans shift, but you don't get that kind of audible, all right, the engine's working hard here, or it's not working hard here. It's a really interesting experience.
Yeah, it feels like it's got a very smooth baseline, you know? It never really feels like the car is struggling.
I mean, look, I think that It's a very, very, very cool piece of technology, and I definitely understand why it cemented itself as being one of the most significant cars in the Chrysler history book. But from an actual, is it better than a V8? If you care about smoothness and smoothness alone, yes. But just from a cost per unit and development cost, I do understand why it would be hard to make the business case.
There's no but, Tommy. This is cool. I wish they had made more. Tommy, it seems like most of the noise from this car is coming from the front.
Yeah, dude.
It's not actually that loud at the back.
It legitimately sounds like an airplane.
Yeah, it really does. I wonder why.
I wonder why. So guys, my buddy Clayton is here. Clayton, who do you work for?
I work with driving.ca, and I came prepared because I always had a question about these cars.
Yeah, so we've always wondered, like, can you melt someone's feet by standing too close to a turbine car? So I'm pretty close. I'm still alive.
So the pavement underneath the exhaust, 103.
Okay.
Pavement not under the exhaust is 103. It's the same. Temperature of the exhaust pipe itself, 196 Fahrenheit, and right there at the outlet, like 120. Yeah, so the pavement underneath it, not that hot. It's an 85-degree day today anyways. Regular pavement, I don't know if you can see, about 107 anyway, so it doesn't substantially like melt the pavement or anything. It's not hotter than like a normal exhaust, I don't think.
Now, standing right behind the car, like right here, you can definitely feel it on your legs.
Feel the draft. Wait, where do you feel on your legs?
Kind of like right here.
Okay. I will test. Your leg is approximately 133 degrees. That's pretty toasty. My leg is 93. So that's a 40-degree difference.
So you definitely feel the heat coming off, but you're going to feel similar heat standing behind
any car, really.
Any car, yeah.
But now we know.
Now we know. It won't burn your legs.
So Tommy, we've got a view under the hood of the turbine car. This is pretty cool. One of the first things that greets you is this Chrysler crest. It says Chrysler Corporation and Turbine over the top of it. And then of course the actual engine itself, the turbine, looks nothing like anything you've seen under the hood of any other vehicle.
And what's crazy is it's actually really small, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty compact.
Probably the size of, what, a couple watermelons?
Of how many watermelons in what size? That's an interesting size comparison.
That right there is a 2 watermelon engine, I think. From a size standpoint.
Not in displacement, but in overall volume.
In overall volume, yeah. But like, look, I mean, it's very compact, and the craziest part is the cooling system. There's no conventional radiator. Instead, you get these little coils.
Yeah.
And that's all you got. That's what keeps this engine at 1,300 degrees.
Yeah, extremely basic. The other cool thing here, I love these headlight buckets. They're absolutely massive, and it looks like the intake of a jet engine, but it is just the headlight surround. And the styling of this car is really interesting. So apparently, the guy who designed this was Elwood Engel, who designed the Ford Thunderbird, and you can see a little bit of similarity between this car and that.
100%.
And I love the Thunderbird, but this is cooler.
This is way cooler. We are here with a really special and knowledgeable guest. Brandon, it's nice to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you.
And what's your title? What do you do?
I'm manager of historical services for Stellantis. So basically I manage the vehicle collection and the corporate archives.
So all these cars that you see out here today for celebrating the Chrysler 100th anniversary, these are all kind of under these are your babies?
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
Yes. And I have 2 very talented gentlemen that keep them running because I don't have that ability.
Fair enough. Well, we're here with probably one of the most iconic Chrysler products of all time. So we've got the hood pop right now, and I was wondering if you could kind of walk me through what we're looking at and the basics on how it works.
Well, it's the regenerative turbine engine. Basically, it's got 1 spark plug, no pistons.
Okay.
Think early turboprop or turbine technology.
Yeah,
okay. All right? They started working on these engines in 1954, and the program lasted all the way up till 1981. Wow. This is the 3rd generation turbine. So the front part's all an air box, the batteries in the rear, and it's really a simple engine, basically. It runs at 23,000 RPM, and at 1,500 degrees it's comfortable.
Unreal.
So temperature is the enemy of the engine. So that's why we've been very gentle with it all day today on a hot day.
Yeah.
So it and the idea of the whole turbine thing was 80% less parts than a standard internal combustion engine. Like I said, 1 spark plug would be simplicity.
Okay.
The problem is building it wasn't simple. The metals, the ceramics, all the special materials that went into it is really what drove the cost so far up that it really never became practical.
So this turbine, was it built in-house by Chrysler, or
Yes.
was it, okay?
In Dearborn, Michigan.
Wow.
They had a plant over there special to put them together.
Unreal.
The chassis was built here. The body and the interior were made by Ghia in Italy. So they were made back at the Dearborn plant.
So I guess my question is, if this engine runs at 1,300 RPM, or sorry, 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, why aren't there radiators everywhere? I mean, how does the temperature cooling work on this vehicle?
Well, there's a large baffled exhaust.
Okay.
Okay, it's very thick, and it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So that dissipates the heat by the time it makes it to the rear of the car. You can walk up and put your hand behind it.
Okay.
Okay, but we've had this at car shows on lawns where we started it throughout the day, and by the end of the day, the grass is burnt there.
Okay.
So it does generate the heat, it does expel it, but it's not throwing fire out the back or anything.
And does it use a traditional automatic? How does the transmission work?
It is it's a modified 727.
Okay.
So anything else that was in a Chrysler product at the time, they just modified it a bit where it mounted pretty much, and it was pretty off the shelf stuff.
Yeah. So we're looking at a car now that's going on 60 years old, and it's a car that we've been cruising around in all day today. So what does it take to keep this machine running?
Well, babying it for the most part.
Okay.
We were fortunate enough to have a gentleman that Bill Carey. He's a retired Chrysler guy, and when this program was going on, he would go around to the dealers. They sent these vehicles around the country to private families.
How many families in total?
200 families across the country. 50 of the cars were shipped out. 55 were built. 50 were shipped out for this program, so all the families got them for 3 months at a time. And Bill would go around to the dealership and teach the technicians how to take care of them. We were fortunate enough to have Bill teach my guys how to take care of them.
Unreal.
Basically, don't mess it up. Don't overheat it.
Okay.
Because you're not going to be able to repair it. And there aren't any more engines.
So this is what you got.
Yeah.
So in the program, were people generally pretty satisfied with the reliability? Did they hold up?
People liked it. I
Okay.
mean, what they liked was the immediate heat it had when in the winter, in the cold months.
Okay.
Like if you're in Chicago or somewhere and you had immediate heat in the car.
Yeah, interesting.
Everybody enjoyed it. They enjoyed the attention they got. All
Yeah.
the neighbors would come running and everybody else. And being in Detroit, a lot of them ended up running around Detroit.
Interesting.
Okay. People taking them home from corporate or whatever. So wherever we go, somebody's like, the guy down the street had one of those, brought it home, and we all got a ride in it.
Yeah.
And everybody remembers it. But overall, the reception was real positive. People liked it.
So, Brant, I made a list. I did some preliminary research on this car and made a list of things that have been generally circulated online.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me whether or not they're true or whether it's a myth.
Okay.
So one of the things I read a bunch about these cars is they can run on pretty much anything combustible.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anything really, except for leaded gasoline.
Okay.
Leaded gasoline will leave deposits that it can't handle.
So there's a story that one ran on perfume and one ran on tequila. Is that potentially true?
It's very potentially true, especially the tequila one.
Okay.
We have pictures of the president of Mexico with the car.
Okay.
And that one I believe is true.
Okay.
We actually run on kerosene.
Why do you run it on kerosene?
It's easy to get.
Okay. And it's easier
cleaner
than okay.
It's cleaner than unleaded gasoline. It burns better.
What about diesel? Can you run them on diesel?
You can. It's not really recommended, but you can
Okay.
for lifestyle. The best things you can run them on are JP4 jet fuel, which we were running it on. But after 9/11, it made it harder for my guys to get into an airport to pull up and get fuel.
Sure.
So we just run on kerosene, and it runs clean. You can smell it for sure.
So that is true. They'll run on pretty much anything
Yes.
that combusts.
And
Very
that
cool.
that was really not a byproduct of the program. That was an idea.
Huh.
That was one of the goals, is to make it a flex fuel vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another thing I read a lot online related to fuel economy. Is that true that fuel economy is pretty poor?
For 1963, no.
Okay.
It was very, its performance and its economy were very close to, say, a 318 engine in another Chrysler.
Very interesting.
You know, you're getting 10, 12 miles a gallon. So today, yeah, it's poor, but you can't compare it to when they were working it on.
Do you know what the fuel tank capacity is?
22 gallons.
22 gallons.
Yeah, it's a big tank.
It's a big tank. Yeah.
Yeah.
So realistically, you're doing over 250 miles on a tank.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Another thing I read, we already talked about it, the melt your feet. Simply
Right.
not true.
Not true.
Okay, good to know.
You can try it today if you want.
It'll melt an ice cream,
Yeah,
but maybe
yeah.
not your feet. A lot of folks said that they're pretty underpowered and slow. Is that true? And that there's a big delay between throttle
It's
inputs.
called turbine lag.
Okay.
When you put your foot on the gas and start going, there is a noticeable gap. It's not like electric vehicle nowadays where you just shoot.
Yeah.
There is a gap, and what it is, and I'm not an engineer, but it basically has to spool up. It
Okay.
has to get those RPMs up to get going.
Yeah.
So there is a 5-second lag-ish.
Uh-huh.
So it's enough of something that they did call it turbine lag.
Interesting. A lot of folks claim part of the reason that this car never continued in development is it was very costly to build and develop. Is that true?
That's very correct.
Okay.
What I was told by Bill, the gentleman I mentioned earlier, is each engine was about $40,000 in 1963 to produce. Wow. So you would get a $3,000 car and pay an extra $40,000 to get the car, and that's really, you know, like I mentioned, that we worked on it until 1981. The gas economy never reached where the potential they wanted.
Okay.
And the manufacturing cost never got down low enough to justify it.
And I read a lot about emissions too. Is it true that it's hard to keep them clean?
I don't know anybody ever tried, but it would be
would be
not
tough.
easy because the exhaust I told you about, trying to stick a catalytic converter somewhere in the middle of there would be a little different.
But I mean, and I think the last question I have is ultimately why was this car only produced in such limited numbers, and why was the program kind of abandoned?
Well, they were expensive to produce.
Okay.
For an experimental car, they normally make 1, 2, 3, 4. They made 55 of them. So they tried. They put their effort into it, and it kind of served its purpose because it was the greatest marketing campaign in automotive history.
Yeah.
Because all these cars were all over the country, and people were driving them for us in their neighborhoods, and they were showing off what Chrysler can do.
That's
this
really cool.
crazy thing, and you know, it served its purpose. And like I said, they built more. They weren't custom bodied. They were they put a turbine into a Murata and an Aspen, a couple other things.
Sure.
But it just, you know, they got in with the Department of Energy, and that kind of helped the program, but not really. And then what really was the end of it was the dark days of the loan guarantee.
Okay.
You know, there was just no more money for research and development
dried
of
up.
something like this.
Yeah.
That is, you know, they've been working on it since '54, and it hadn't come to market. At a certain point, you have to say we don't have the investment for it.
And Brant, last question I'll bug you with. There's all sorts of things that just came to mind that are challenges when you get rid of an internal combustion engine in this era. So for example, like there's no belt drive on the front of the
Right.
engine. So where do you get your electricity from?
I believe it's battery operated. It's just off the batteries.
Okay.
It has 2 batteries in the back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Does it have an alternator?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. What about coolant? There's no coolant
There's
in the
no
engine at all.
coolant. There's air coming in. It's air going out.
What about power steering and power brakes?
It has power steering and power brakes.
It does?
Yes.
Interesting. So even though it doesn't have an accessory drive.
Right. They're kind of buried in there in the fenders.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. And Brant, if there's one thing you want to leave people with about the legacy of the Turbine car, what would it be?
It's the coolest car ever built. You know? Nothing sounds like it. Other companies tried it as gimmicks. We really, I mean, it should be acknowledged that Chrysler put a lot of effort in to an alternate powered vehicle way back when, before it was popular with anybody else.
Yeah.
We're on the forefront of trying new technology, seeing what could work.
Oh, last thing, because Case pointed this out. read a lot about these being very difficult to start, like an 8-step starting procedure. Is it pretty straightforward, or is there a lot to it?
We hook up the battery and turn a key. It's
busted. There you go.
I don't know. I've been missing 7 of the steps then for all these years because I turned the key.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Brand, thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
It was an
It's been
absolute
fun.
pleasure. Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.